hello everyone out there that's watching. And thank Tommy, Seminole Winds Restaurant in Cairo, Georgia again for letting us use the restaurant. And Lord, just bless this restaurant to the maximum. Father, we just thank you for whatever you're going to do. Bring the word out clear and plain tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. I've been listening to Kenneth Copeland and Jesse Duplantis from a couple of weeks ago while I was in Moldova. But they said, believe God for the impossible. And with us believing God for the impossible, Jesse was talking about somebody told him one time to believe God for an airplane. And so he's trying to get somebody to come in agreement with him to believe God for the airplane. And some guy told him, he said, well, you can't even believe God to fill up your Toyota with gas. How can you believe God for an airplane? So he was at Kenneth Copeland's, one of his meetings, and our ministry or somewhere or another, and Gloria, somebody that's kin to Gloria come up to him and said, have you believed God for an airplane? You're going to need one. And then Kenneth come in agreement with him, believing God for an airplane. And he said now he's had 3 airplanes ever since then, 3 different airplanes, and now he's believing God to get a 4th one, different one, as much as he travels. And so he says, believe God for the impossible. And we put God short. We don't believe him for the impossible. We believe him, okay, Lord, bring me my bills to be paid. But we don't believe him to have enough to pay somebody else's bills. I was telling the Lord one time, I said, Lord, I don't have no needs. And he said, who says you don't have no needs? And I said, Lord, I don't have no needs. All the bills are paid for. That's before Barry died. And he said, who says you don't have no needs? And I knew, okay, I feel to be in trouble with the Lord, because when he asked us a question 2 or 3 times, it's like, okay. I said, all right, Lord, what's my need? He said, you have a need as long as you don't have enough money to pay off somebody's house when I tell them to, or to pay somebody's doctor bill, or pay for a new car for somebody. He said, you'll have a need until you can do that. And he says, now do you have a need? I said, yes, sir, because I sure can't pay somebody's house or can't buy a house. And so he said, but you've got the need as long as you don't have enough money to do what I tell you to do. And he says, start believing me for you to have enough money for everything you want, and enough money to help somebody when I tell you to. And Jesse was talking about how the Lord had told him in one of the ministers' meetings to give a check for $100,000, and Jesse said, well, fortunately at that time he hadn't. He said, now when he first started out he didn't. And so he did it, and then Kenneth Copeland just walked by him and he says, I'll believe for 100-fold return on it. And he said later on he had a 100-fold return on the $100,000. And see, he didn't have enough money to believe. He had to believe God to fill the Toyota up when he started. And that's where we miss God so much, is we don't believe him for what all we need. And I have enough, say, for you to play my plane tickets, or have enough for me to play everybody else's plane tickets here when we go to Peru. We're going to Peru the last of October, 1st of November. And so I have a need because I don't have enough money to pay for that. Not for everybody else's, and for mine too right now, but God will bring it in. So we got to realize we see things like the world sees them. We don't see them like God sees them. And he's got more money than enough. And he's been just began showing me, believe me for this stuff. Believe me, believe me. He says, expand your vision, expand it for all that you need with what he's telling me to do with the ministry. And he's beginning to show me how just little things. Like last week when the rain was every day since we've been back from Moldova, it has rained. And so I knew it was full moon. And I like looking at the full moon coming back from Tallahassee to Moultrie. And so I sit there and says, Lord, I would like to see the moon when I come out of church tonight instead of coming out in the rain and all the clouds and everything. And I said, this is a full moon. And me and Mabel like to look at the full moon on that road coming home. I said, we got an hour drive, an hour 15 minutes. So I said, I'd like to see the moon. So when we did that, We went in church. I didn't say anything to Mabel about it. I just went in church. And I got out of the car and got out on the road heading home. And I looked to the east, and the moon was completely full, no clouds around it. And I just busted out laughing. And laughed and laughed and laughed. And Mabel finally said, I'll tell you in a few minutes what I'm laughing about. Hello there.
Hello, how you doing?
I thought you were in the back. Where's your lovely bride?
She is not feeling very well, so she try to rest some. Because I'm about to wear her out, dragging her around on my 7-day schedule.
You have extra energy to go on the 7-day schedule.
I guess I do.
Oh, we're on camera too.
I've been seeing it going for about a week. I've been noticing her kind of, and today she just said, gosh, do you ever get to rest? I said, no, that's me and the devil at war there right now, so.
Well, you got to rest some.
Yeah, she got a taste of it yesterday, some of the warfare that I had to fight with.
Okay, we're on camera now.
Oh, I know? Okay, all right, well, anyway. All right, so here we are.
We'll come back to it. I was telling them last week with all the rain, I've been talking to God about quitting, getting the rain stopped for a few days. It had rained 8 inches of rain in 2 days. And I come out of my car at night coming home, and I've got to walk through a little water coming down the driveway. And then to get in my doorstep, water was almost up to the top of my shoe where it was standing there. And I was just tired. So on the way home Tuesday night, I said, Lord, I'm coming to you as your daughter. I said, nothing because I've done anything, nothing because I'm special or anything. He said, I'm just your daughter. And I just want to come home without having to walk through the rain with my motion light working. The night light in the backyard's not working because a tree come down and took it down. And the light people ain't climbing that pole until it gets to where it's not lightning every day, and they ain't gonna take no chances. I can understand that. And they ain't gonna walk through the water to get soggy ground to get to that light pole and put work with electricity. And I said, I gotta have a little flashlight to come in the house with in the rain. I said, Lord, I'm your daughter. Help. Help, Father, help. And so I said, Lord, tomorrow night, that was Tuesday, I said, I'd like to just see the moon. I said, it's a full moon. Me and Mabel like to look at the moon. And I was telling her right before you come out of church Wednesday night, instead of it being raining and raining all the way home, I told Mabel, I just busted out laughing because it was full moon. And it wasn't a cloud in the sky. No clouds around that. Just normal cloud, not no rain cloud. Finally, when I quit laughing so hard, Mabel says, okay. I said, I asked God for the moon to be shining so we could see the moon tonight. And I said they were predicting how much more rain that night and rain for days still. There's the moon. So we saw the full moon all the way from Tallahassee to Thomasville.
Right.
After I let Mabel out, them clouds lightning back up towards the house. And I said, Lord, I'm still your daughter. I ain't nothing special. I'm just your daughter. And I don't want to have to walk in rain in the house with a flashlight tonight because there's no lights outside. And I said, if you're hearing me and if you're going to do something, I said, let me see, 1 star. I said, just 1 star. And so when I got closer to the little town of Coolidge, after I went through there and gone closer to the house, the Lord says, look to your left. And I turned up where it was a field by a field where you could see out there in the field good. And I turned there and I looked up to the sky on the left-hand side. There was 1 star. Just 1 star. I said, Lord, there's a star. He said, you asked me for 1. He said, you asked me for a bunch of them. He said, you just asked me to say 1. I said, yes, sir. He says, it's not going to rain when you get home. I was getting close and the lightning was still there and everything, so I was expecting the rain. And he said, it's not going to rain though. So I sat there, I got home, lightning up above town and everything. Walked in, there's no water to walk through. It was wet, but no water to walk through. Walked in the house, and I said, thank you. He said, if you wanted more than 1 star, he said, I'd gave you one to look at. But that 1 was right in the middle of the clouds. And then it didn't rain anymore till Saturday. That was Wednesday. And it rained Saturday night. The Lord says, well, I watered your flowers for you. And then no more rain. But God is saying, believe Him for the impossible. Start believing Him for the impossible. We believe for what we need today, but we don't believe Him for the impossible. I looked at a piece of land last Friday. And I was telling Anthony, my son, about it. And it's over $300,000 for 79 acres and got a barn on it with a 2-bedroom apartment upstairs. And I love the place because it's got a nice pond on it. Just a place to get away and get quiet. I was telling Anthony, I may buy that place. He says, what you gonna pay with it for? I said, I don't know, but my father's got the money. He said, believe him for the impossible. And I said, God does, I want to get away from close to the Clockney River. And I said, I want to get where I can have some peace and quiet, where I can go out in my yard again and see the birds and everything without all the traffic, because they use the road by my house for cutting across from Funston to Thomasville to Tallahassee, and they fly by there between 7 and 8 o'clock. If you go out, you better make sure you're going to get on out of the way. You don't take off real slow. I mean, they just fly going to work. And I said, it used to be peaceful and quiet. Now they realize that road cuts off. So they don't have to go around town and everything. So they make shortcuts and all the subdivisions and everything they built. I tell the Lord, I just want some peace and quiet. And I looked at that place, and then he says, trust me for it. He said, believe me for it. I said, Lord, that's a lot of money for me. He said, you want it? I said, I'd like to have it. He says, believe me for the impossible. And I told Anthony, my son, I said, I'm going to believe God for that piece of land. I said, I don't know how he's going to pay for it. But I'm going to believe God for that piece of land. And it sounds crazy, but the Lord had told me back in the 90s to start believing him for an airplane. Jesse's talking about believing for an airplane. At that time I said, well, Lord, I really don't need an airplane. And after we stayed so many hours in the airport and then missed our plane in Atlanta, I said there, maybe I do need an airplane. And 2 pilots and a place to park it and the insurance and all like that. But Jesse was talking about, he says, believe God for the impossible. At that time, he didn't need the airplane. He knew he was going to. But God is saying the trips we'll be making overseas next year. It would be nice to go get into a corporate jet and leave from Tallahassee and fly to wherever these mission trips are going for, and have enough room in that corporate jet for the ones that's flying with us to leave. The only thing we'll have to do is have the pilots and everything that goes with the airplane, and then land where we won't need to land at, refuel and everything, and not have to go through all the hassle and the waiting and the long hours in the airports. And just think about it, if you leave Tallahassee, Florida, and fly to Nigeria like we're going next year, we'll have to stop and fuel somewhere or another. But we don't have to have the airport time. Or like going to Peru. We spend 4 hours in the Atlanta airport. Hour and a half in the Tallahassee airport. So you're spending 5 or 5.5 hours in airports. And then all the checks you got to go through and everything like that. I said, Lord, I'm going to start believing you for an airplane. So y'all start believing me with it, maybe especially. Y'all going to be traveling with us some? But think about it. First class tickets is $1,600. Coach is $1,000. So when you got a team of 5 or 6 or 10 people, that's $16,000 first class tickets for 10 people. So look at what it'll save financially wise. And Jesse says it sure helps him out, and Kenneth Copeland does too, with all their schedules. So I said, yeah, okay, Lord, I'm going to start believing you. But what is it you need to believe him for that's impossible? And I said, God, there's other things, but he says, believe me for the impossible. And the other thing that Jesse was talking about was believing God to reach down in the middle of whatever the situation is, in the middle of that situation, and pull it up out of it and cast it into the sea. Speak to that mountain, command it to be gone, and cast it in the sea. And I had seen the video. He was talking about Mount St. Helens, when that mountain, half the side of the mountain blew off when it blew. Well, I had seen those videos. A man had videoed him, and God kept that man alive in the back side of a cliff. He was inside the cave in front of it, and he knew that he was going to be fried because the lava was coming right at him, and he knew any minute that, he said, well, maybe something of the camera would leave pictures of what was going on when they found his body. But he said when the lava got close to him, it turned and jumped over. And everything he had on video camera was kept. But God kept him that way. But it proved what man says on evolution, everything can't be. On that video camera. And it was so amazing is how everything is on camera of what evolution could, because it showed how when the trees were cut off and put in that water, and then the lava hit that water, all those trees turned, how do you say it, when it's been there for hundreds of years? Petrified, is that it?
No, petrified, yeah.
Yeah. Instantly. And it's got on video camera. I mean, it was done in just a few minutes' time, how those trees, but it was the cold water and the hot lava hitting them instantly and made it look like they'd been there for thousands of years. But it's all on video camera. And so, it's there. But Jesse said, think about that. He says, God reached down in that lake, eventually, that water, pulled that mountain up out of it. And then he took that mountain, and when it come off, it went down in that water, that lake down from it. He says, now think about the thing in your life. He says, reach down in it. Pick that there impossible thing up, and then throw it, cast it in the sea. And he was asking the Lord, why cast it into the sea? You know, he says, well, that's the only thing that it can't be seen. If you take that mountain of death or that mountain of sickness or whatever, if it's not cast, that mountain is not cast into the sea, then you're going to see it again. But it says bury it in the sea. Bury it in the sea. And give it to the Lord. And I said, there, I hadn't thought about that. And he says he literally visualizes, and I've been praying, God, how do we deal with cancer? He says he literally rebukes the cancer and sees him reaching down in the spirit realm to that spirit of cancer and pulling it out and casting it into the sea. And he says people get healed from cancer. I said, okay, God, you've answered one of my questions. And I read another article the other day where it said cancer, this guy, they told him he was going to die on the 24th of the month, whatever month it was. And the doctor gave him the report and everything. He said, now you look at it, you turn it to him upside down. He said, you can't. This is the report of what's going to happen in your life and everything. You only got a few days to live. And he and a lot of people were agreeing with him and praying with him. And the Lord told him, he says, tell that cancer it's going to die on the 23rd. The doctor says, you're going to die on the 24th. So he says, tell that cancer you're going to die on the 23rd and you're not going to kill me. So he spoke to the cancer, him and the prayer people were believing with him praying. And they told that cancer it would be completely dead on the 23rd. And he was going to go back to the doctor on the 24th. And the doctor says, you know, you're going to die on the 24th. And he told the doctor, no, I'm not. He said, I'm going to live. We went back to the doctor on the 24th, and there was no cancer in his body. Now, the body was eaten up with cancer, but the cancer died on the 23rd. He says, now, the doctor said, you're going to die. He says, start giving the cancer the date it's going to die. That sickness, give it the date it's going to die. That financial thing, give it the date it's going to die. That family problem, give it the date it's going to die. And then believe God to kill it and cast it in the sea. And Jesus did that with a fig tree. I've heard all these tales about the fig tree this and the fig tree that. I was asking the Lord about the fig tree the other day, and he says, the fig tree is a fig tree. I was like, okay. He says, the fig tree was a fig tree. It was not anything else. He says, I spoke to the fig tree. He said, I was hungry and it didn't have anything on it. I spoke to it and it died. He says, now if you speak to that thing in your life, it'll die just like that fig tree did. He said, don't make up all that stuff that people have made up. And I'm probably hitting somebody's sacred cows that talk about it. But there was nothing, and I had always thought the fig tree was just literally a fig tree. And he spoke to that fig tree and told it to die. Now it had leaves on it, but it was not time for figs to be on it. But he was hungry. He could have just as easily told the fig tree, you put figs on it right now. Go ahead.
And you know, that's where I have a big problem of mine. Because, you know, in the midst of everything that I've been through financially and still going through right now, people want to tell me, and these are godly people, want to tell me, well, Tommy, maybe you just misunderstood God. Maybe. I believe, and that your example of that fig tree is exactly what I'm talking about. I believe that whatever you do, because the word says whatever. Whatever you say, believe and you'll have it. Whatever you ask for, believing you will have it. Well, what's the limitation on whatsoever? There is no limitation. Jesus went to a fig tree. I was waiting to see if you were going to say that or not, because it was not fig season. I mean, the tree had leaves on it. Well, hey, you know what? I got a fig tree. I used to have a fig tree in my yard. That was the first thing my little baby daughter Jenny learned to climb as a tree, was that fig tree. And she'd be up in the top of that thing. Oh, it used to scare my first wife to death. But she was a climber like her daddy. But, this fig tree had leaves all the time, but it didn't have figs all the time until the fall. Then it lost its leaves until the spring. But this fig tree, it was not time for figs. But it had its leaves and everything. And it presented itself to have figs because it was, you could say it had its crown on, its leaves. But it didn't have any jewels in the ground. But, there's, all our trees do that. Pecan trees don't just have leaves. Matter of fact, they lose their leaves and then you see the evidence of their fruit. But, that was not even the time to ask for figs, but Jesus wanted figs. And so that tree did not produce what it was supposed to have when he wanted it. But he had the faith to believe it, and so that same faith that believed for figs and they weren't there was the same faith that killed it. And it's, I believe in that same context, was it right? No, it's not right to expect figs off of a fig tree when they don't have figs, but it is if you're God, and it is if you're a son of God. So, whatsoever you shall ask. I believed wholeheartedly for these restaurants. With all my heart, I believed and I praised God for them and everything like that. And, I've discussed with Gloria the things that I saw that went wrong with me. Now, in this whatsoever that we tackle, it's what's the thing that we want. It needs to be in us to birth, to have the faith, to have the walk with God to produce whatsoever. I mean, if I want a big business in Tallahassee, Florida, but I'm not, doing the things that I need to do or believing God and walking with God the way that I need to be walking with Him wholeheartedly, then the world or the evil one is going to begin to start picking at it and taking away from it. But, I don't believe one bit that my restaurants that have failed one bit because of anything my God didn't do. I'll be the first one to say it was because Tommy didn't do. Tommy wasn't walking the walk he was supposed to be doing. Tommy wasn't praying 5 times a day or whatever he needed to pray to meet the needs for what he was believing for. Because the Bible says when you ask for something or when you want to go do something, make sure that you have what it takes to do it. If I'm going to build a house, I need to make sure if I want to build a $70,000 house, you don't go build a $70,000 house for $40,000, you're going to fall on your face. If you want to build a $70,000 house, you better have the faith to build it. And to walk the walk that you need to do. And to talk the talk. And to do the things of God that you are supposed to be doing. And I don't mean by works. What I mean is just in faith. I mean, as I walked into the businesses I walked in and God was just expanding my horizons, I was the one that withdrew. I was the one that got scared and pulled back and said, didn't have the faith to believe God that figs were going to be on that tree unless I went and put them on there. And so it failed because I didn't do God's work and let God do mine. God's work was to put figs on that tree. And Jesus believed for the figs to be on the tree. Otherwise, he wouldn't have walked up to it to pick them. Because in faith, he walked up to that tree to pick him some figs, and they weren't there. You know, and so, I mean, that's what we need to look at, because I believe that Jesus, if anybody had the faith to put figs on that tree, Jesus did. You know, and so I feel that, like I said, you can believe God for anything and get it, but be prepared to do the work now to produce it. You know, you got to dig around that tree. And I don't mean, I'm not a farmer, but you dig around the tree. What is the Bible story where the guy says, well, wait a minute, let's don't cut these trees down right now, Lord. Let me take it and I'll dung it and I'll do this and we'll see what it does. And of course, I believe at the end of the story, it produced fruit.
So give me one more year with it.
Yeah, give him one more year with it. But he had to work it. He had to work it. Our work. And this is something that I get caught up with, and it's a battle I'm fighting every day. But our work, my work, Tommy Bryant's work in Seminole Wind Restaurant, I got managers. My work is to let them manage and for me to walk in this restaurant and do the work of God. That's my place. And when I get out of my place, things are messed up. You know, and if I'm in my position, then I can watch. There was a time, you know, before I went and opened that Tallahassee restaurant up, there was fig on my tree all the time. My tree didn't never have figs on it. I could go pick figs off my tree in December because the fruit was always there. Because God was always producing fruit in my life. And like I said, I got to where I was too busy for a lot of things, and I started feeling like, oh, when I got problems, can't trust the managers, the help's doing this, and so I just fell into the devil's scheme to begin, I have to do it, I have to do it. Well, anytime I have to do anything, I am now God, and I can't make fruit out of nothing. Okay? God could put fruit on that fig tree. I can't. So I'm a false God. Is trying to produce my own fruit, manufacture my own fruit, and I can't do it. And so I've got to look after the things of God. And that's a struggle that I'm fighting right now, and the devil is after me with everything he's got because of what I'm trying to do, and I've declared this to my employees. I have declared this to my managers. I said, managers, I'm going to quit coming in here and yeah, my employees about every little thing they're doing. I'm going to start letting y'all do that, and then if they're not doing it, I see them not doing it, I'm not going to go get Susan. I'm coming to see my manager and say why my manager's not doing her job or his job. Because when I walk through that door, you know, I need to be able not to have to run around here and see all this stuff going wrong. The cream corn didn't get stirred up, and the pepper is in gobs of black pepper. And the manager didn't see it, but now I see it, so now I got to take over and handle it. No, I got to go get my manager. You see this? Why don't you fix it? I don't want to come in my restaurant and see this again. And that's what I got to do. Because the devil wants me to be occupied with this gob of black pepper. Because he knows my nature. And he knows that I'm going to get it wrapped up in it, and it's going to be the rest of my day right there.
He knows your weak space.
He knows where it's at. And what I need to be doing is being able to walk in, manager, look at there, take care of it. I got people to go out here and meet and greet. You know, and witness to people and pray for people. Used to, people would come to Seminole Wind restaurants because they heard that I prayed for people. I ain't heard that in a long time. You know, hadn't heard it, you know, because it hadn't been being done. There ain't no fruit on the fig tree. And Jesus keeps saying, you know, I need some fruit. And if there ain't no fruit there, then he's going to kill it. And he's going to go and plant it somewhere else, plant another one.
And he's going to deal with you and dig around you and then give you a year.
Yeah.
See what you're going to do in that year's time.
Yeah.
When we were in Bogota, Colombia, there was a fig tree outside the room we were meeting in during the daytime. And we were going from there down to the pastor's house. And not real tall, but a big bunch around where you could still. And I looked and it had big, huge figs on it. And I looked at her and I said, it's not season for figs. And she said, somebody likes figs that's there. She says, that tree never is without figs. Mm-hmm. I said, do what? And she said, that tree is never without figs. She says, 12 months a year, that tree has figs on it. Yeah. Oh. Think about it. 12 months a year, that fig tree undoubtedly the pastor, whoever, somebody there, because she didn't tell me who, but she said, I mean, she told me, but I don't know who they were, you know. But she says, that tree has figs on it. And I mean, it had figs, and she says it's ripe figs all the time on it. Mm-hmm. Had green figs and ripe figs on it. But there was enough ripe figs on it. If I want to stop that day to pick figs off of it, I could eat figs off of it. Yeah. So that's what we do. And as we let God do our work, then we do His work. It's like all the problems I was facing before I went to Moldova. And I finally told the Lord on Saturday afternoon before we flew out on Sunday, I was having problems with my son. And I told the Lord, I said, you've kept him healthy, you've kept him alive for 41 years. I said, I'm going to do your work, and it's your job to take care of him. Mm-hmm. And I left, not knowing what was I going to face when I come home. Right. But that's what we have to do is, okay, no matter what's going on, like Tommy's having to learn, get back out here in this restaurant, pray for people. And I was in a restaurant before we went to Moldova in Tallahassee, and the manager was going from table to table and saying, is everything okay? Can I get you anything? This manager didn't have to do that. Mm. When we was on the plane coming back from Moldova, the head flight attendant over all the flight attendants on that plane was going from seat to seat and says, is there anything on this plane you need before we land? How was your flight? Did we meet your specifications and everything? You didn't have to. When we was going to Peru one night, the lady did that right about an hour before we landed. She says, everything okay? Twice, and all the times we've flown, there's somebody come and asked us. They were checking to make sure the people flying was happy. That was in business class. And I used my flight miles to go business class. So, and then God buys business class tickets for me too, so that I don't have to sit back in the back. I prayed for years, and now God does it. Now I'm praying for years, been praying for years for the plane, and God says, now it's time to start believing me for that plane. I've been praying for 20 years for that plane. Now it's time to believe Him. How He's going to do it, I don't know. But that's His job. My job is to believe Him for it. But that manager at that restaurant was doing what Tommy said he should do. He went from place to place, first from table to table, and he didn't say, could I pray for you though? But he says, is everything okay? Was your food cooked right? How was the server? He didn't have to do that. Now we eat out last night. The food was the last time I ate at that place. Third time in a month's time, 2 months' time, or a month and a half's time, the food has been bad. I called the manager over there, but the manager didn't come to see. I had to call him over there. And then he offered to replace it, and I said no, because I said, you're going to have the same stuff, and it's still burnt. It had a scorched taste to it. I knew it was scorched when I tasted the pasta. Now, this is a big restaurant in Tallahassee. But when I taste that pasta, but undoubtedly they've taken the pasta out of the pot when it's scorched and put it in another one, and probably washed it off. But it still had that tinge of, once scorched, it's going to taste it.
It's in the pasta then.
It's in it. And he said, well, can I bring some more? I said, have you cooked a fresh pie? He said, no. I said, forget it then. Hello there. I said, forget it then. So with it being that way, I won't go back again. That's the third time. So I won't be going back to that restaurant again, unless God tells me to go there. And but see, the manager never come to the table until I asked for him. And see, that's what Tommy's talking about now. Is his job is to go around whichever restaurant he's in. How are you today? Do you need prayer for anything? A lot of times when we're out, me and Mabel's out, I says, how are y'all today? Do you need prayer for anything? I don't have to. My job is to find out if that person needs prayer, and it's God's job to provide everything else. It's my job to stop what I'm doing, wherever I'm at, to pray for that person. And it's God's job to bring in all the finances for everything. And Calvin just walked in, so the tree in the yard fell Thursday night. They come out Friday and cut it up. But Saturday, people was knocking on my door, wanting to know if they could have that big old pile of wood. I mean, you got a pile of wood like this high from here to Calvin.
I think we're going to be there tomorrow.
Uh-huh.
You're supposed to help me in the morning, so we'll see.
You're going to have somebody, need somebody to help you tote it. You need somebody to help you tote that wood. I'll call Scott, but he'll be a little bit.
No, we can get Ruben's authority. He likes the one that comes.
But the guy knocked on, but I didn't go to bed till almost, it was after 4 o'clock. Saturday morning before I went to bed, I was just spending time with the Lord and doing other things. And then it's after 5:30 before I finally went to sleep. Well, 9 o'clock in the morning, this man's knocking at the door. And he's sitting out there in my yard with a trailer in his truck, already taken for granted that I'm going to give him this wood. And he knocks on the door, and I see the trailer of the truck, and I know what he's wanting. I said, no, you may not have the wood. And then I realized. And he turns around and leaves. And then Calvin tonight, he said, well, it would have been another one knocked on the door. I was a little bit more polite to that one. And I said, he says, I hate to bother you, because he's seen I just woke up too. And he said, I hate to bother you, but is anybody going to get the wood? And I said, no, I've promised it for a friend of mine. He's going to come get it next week. But Calvin says, well, it's been a good witness thing. I said, at 9 o'clock, I wasn't worried about witnessing anything. I was aggravated. I was having a fit of carnality just about it. It was like, how dare you knock on my door at 9 o'clock? And the man didn't want nothing but the wood. I can understand it, because, I mean, it's cut perfect size. This wood, all you got to do is put it in the fireplace. A couple of them, a few of them you got to bust, but most of it just put it in the wood burning stove or fireplace. So I can understand where he's coming from. But I wasn't ready at 9 o'clock in the morning after going to bed so late to be, okay, let me witness to you. So I missed my opportunity there. But I said, okay. And so then God says, if you don't want them bothering you tomorrow, Sunday, he says, put you a paper on your door saying, no, you may not have the wood. So I've got a 8 by 11 piece of paper on there, big letters on it, no, you may